Could it be that Fox News tried to cover up the Fed's involvement in J6? Well, according to an investigative report from the National Polls, that appears to be exactly the case. Tucker Carlson, while he was at Fox, interviewed former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sun, who told Tucker that events surrounding the January 6th riots at the U.S. Capitol appear to have been, in his words, a cover-up. The problem is that this portion of the interview was never aired by Fox. In the hour-long interview, Sun noted that then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, as well as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Mark Milley, had intelligence to suggest potential problems on Capitol Hill, but they failed to communicate with Sun and his cops on the ground, and it appears it was all purposeful. Here's what Sun had to say.
I actually had to go in and talk to a friend of mine on one of the oversight committees and say, I will come there in person. I want to be there. I want to testify. So I'm glad you think I'm reserved. To be honest with you, I'm a little pissed off because it doesn't have to happen. If people were reporting the intelligence correctly, if I was allowed to do my job as the chief, I got a significant experience. If I was allowed to do my job as the chief, we wouldn't be here today. This didn't happen. Then see how you're out there, you're lambasted in public, and it's all, everything appears to be a cover-up. Like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when you look at the information the intelligence that it had, military had, it's all watered down. I'm not getting intelligence. I'm denied support National Guard in advance. I'm denied National Guard while we're under attack for 71 minutes. You're in a fight?
Yeah.
A fight for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, 1 minute.
Wears you out.
1 minute.
I was going to say, 60 seconds, 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Let me tell you, it wears you out. My officers were fighting for 80 minutes before the protesters ever broke the first one with that.
Wait, can I say, so you described this as a failure to get the intelligence to the people who needed it, but it sounds like worse than, it sounds like they were hiding the intelligence.
And that's what I'm getting at, is could there possibly be people that actually did something to happen and kind of wanted something to happen? It's not a far stretch to begin.
Well, I don't know what the other explanation is.
It's sad when you start putting everything together and thinking about the way this played out. It gets concerning. What was their end goal? You look at what's happening. Was that their end goal? I don't know.
So there you have it, gang. I mean, sorry about the audio on that, but what was so bizarre is that here you've got the Capitol Police Chief himself suggesting that the events surrounding J6 appear to have been intentional on the part of Pelosi and the Democrats, and Fox News doesn't air it. The Murdoch News Network doesn't show the Capitol Police Chief himself claiming that there appears to be some kind of cover-up with what really happened on J6. So if you think it through, you've got two horrors here. You got the horrors of our leaders possibly involved in the events that led to J6 on the one hand, and you got a major news media outlet intentionally covering up that information on the other. Now, what's so interesting here is that this is not the first time the media has been caught hiding information from the public regarding J6. You may remember the Project Veritas hidden camera sting that involved a fellow by the name of Matthew Rosenberg, who's the national security correspondent for the New York Times. And in that video, that hidden video, Rosenberg admitted that the New York Times coverage of the January 6th riots had simply not been accurate. It's not been reliable, and they've consistently published a false narrative to their readers.
The story I got sucked into doing was like, I do investigative stuff. I usually do like longer term things. But I got back to work on Monday, and the managing editor had a great idea that he could have had a month ago, which was like, we should really, me and a colleague had done like a very long 7,000 word story last year in February about like kind of the big lie about the Stop the Steal campaign, which was a very organized campaign. It wasn't like an organic thing. He's like, can we do like part 2 of that, like what's going on in the years from January 6th, kind of like memory holing it, like making it it's no big deal? Yeah, we can do that. It's a little quick turnaround, so we've been doing the last few days. That's the story. But it's in a meeting, and I'm like, one of the issues here is that, like, the Fox News of the world, elsewhere, is that the left's overreaction, the left's reaction to it in some places was so over the top that it gave the opening the right needed to start introducing the idea of, well, these people are out of control. Like, it's not a big deal as they're making it. They were making too big a deal. They were making this an organized thing that it wasn't. And that gave the opening for the lunatics on the right to be like, oh, well, nothing happened here. It was just a peaceful bunch of tourists, And it's like, but nobody was here.
So according to this New York Times reporter who was on the grounds at the Capitol building when it all happened, according to him, January 6th was actually not that big of a deal. But the key here is that that's not what he reported. That very same national security correspondent wrote an article supposedly debunking the so-called big lie that J6 was no big deal and that its significance was largely a fabrication of the left, even though you heard him say precisely those two things. In other words, he was publishing articles about J6 he knew weren't true.
We're the ones, not Fox, not Breitbart, who actually went and uncovered the fact that, there were a ton of FBI informants on the people who attacked the Capitol. That was us, not the right one.
Hey, gang, I'm sure you're now aware of a very new and serious threat coming from... So you heard it yourself. I mean, that was a New York Times reporter claiming that there were, quote, tons of FBI informants among the people who attacked the Capitol. Now, that observation is rather fascinating, to say the least, because when you scour the New York Times coverage of January 6th, they don't seem to take too kindly to that notion that there were FBI informants on the Capitol grounds. I mean, take a look at this headline. Jan 6 panel seeks to debunk unfounded theory about FBI role in riot. Or this one. No, there's no evidence that the FBI organized the Capitol riot. You stupid. It's all about you knuckle-dragging Trump hicks trying to overturn an election. Leave the FBI out of this. So here we got the Capitol Police Chief himself saying that he thinks there was a cover-up, that J6 was intentional on the part of Washington officials. You got the New York Times national security correspondent admitting that there were tons of feds on the ground. And in both cases, Fox and the New York Times refused to report it. And I think we all know the reason for this. I think we can all discern what's behind not just the J6 cover-up with the powers that be in D.C., but also the legacy media's compliance with that alleged cover-up. In 2 words, Donald Trump. J6